Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Vulture, Sentinels, out April 12 on Metal Blade Records. The album has 11 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's 4 full-length studio album. They are a German speed thrash metal band. Now, when it comes to the design of this record, it's pretty much straightforward. There's not much to dissect, there's not much to break down. It's an album that has a lot of fluidity, that has a lot of movement. The speed metal side of the band really controls the tempo and the direction of the record. There is a cool interlude track called Transylvania that sets up the realm of the Impaler. I think that combination of those two songs is really cool, really interesting. Because especially from a streaming standpoint, you don't want to necessarily have them combine as one. It would prolong the song. The interlude would become the intro of the track, and I think that would take a little bit of steam off of that first portion of the record. So separating those two tracks works really well. And then obviously having more of a ballad that breaks the album, the classic approach, the classic design with a side A and a side B with a lot of balance and a lot of equality in terms of what they offer, in terms of the momentum, in terms of the sound, in terms of the experience. So a very balanced, a very natural, old school style, simple approach that obviously works extremely well for a band that has this sound, that has this kind of style, and that offers this kind of experience. Now, what style is that and what sound is that? Well, it's speed thrash, but with an old school flavor to it. And the old school flavor doesn't come just from the execution, it also comes from the production. But it's an old school approach that doesn't feel dated. The album still has a modern vibe to it. It still has, the roots in what today's thrash slash speed is all about. But you definitely have also this old school experience that creeps in, specifically, like I said, with the way the album is put together from a production standpoint, and that gives it a little bit more of a more specific DNA, a more specific vibe, a more specific fingerprint. I like the fact that it brings in a little bit of both worlds. It doesn't bring that modern style, that super clean, super crisp, overly produced picture and essence, which for a band like this would have not worked. When you have this more speed thrash metal sound, you need to go a little bit further back in order to be able to represent what you're trying to do and represent the sound of the band better. So having that old school aroma in the production, in the execution, really brings all of the right elements into the forefront. And you see that by the way they present the guitars, for example. The guitars are really the leading man as far as the overall sound is concerned. And it's one of the cornerstones of the record with the vocals. Those two to me are definitely the pillars of the entire album. You cannot have a record like this without those two elements being as strong, as powerful as they are. So when you look at the guitars first and foremost, you see the fluidity that they have, you see the tempo, how fast they rip, they shred. The speed metal on this album definitely has a bigger piece of the pie. It definitely has a bigger influence, a bigger impact on the guitar sound and the execution of that same sound than the thrash metal side. But there are a lot of thrash metal style riffs, which helps make the songs feel a little bit more dynamic and not one-dimensional. If the album was speed metal from the beginning to the end, a record like this would start to become a little bit repetitive. Very difficult to tell one song from the next. So infusing a little bit of thrash, some chunkier, some heavier riffs, definitely changes the dynamics of the songs. It definitely changes the eyesight of the listener and creates the right ripples that allows the album to still feel balanced all around, but still allow each song to have some unique characteristics that separates them from one another. Then when you get into the drums and bass, the bass on this album actually pops quite a bit, more than I was expecting. And it's not just a matter of popping. The bass on this album is not necessarily just following the rhythm of the song. The bass on this record actually brings some groove elements that separate that sound when it comes in. It's a sound that doesn't jolt you, but you can definitely see the impact when the bass becomes a little bit more predominant. And when it becomes predominant, the fact that it's not following necessarily the same lead as the guitars and it brings in a little bit of grooviness makes the songs more textured. Normally with bands like this, with this kind of more speed metal style sound, the tracks feel very one-directional and very simplistic almost like there's not much underneath the rug. You pull the rug and what you see is what you get. Allowing the bass to creep in, allowing the bass to pop in and be a little bit more groovier, it's a nice way to not completely distort the intent of the track and distort the sound of the band, but definitely add a little bit more substance, a little bit more texture to the way the sound is presented. The drums pack the background, they pack the backdrop, they're definitely at the bottom end of the spectrum. The guitars are almost all the way in the forefront and the drums are all the way in the back. That creates some movement and it creates some space between the elements, which allows the record to feel like it has a lot more width, and once again it doesn't feel as funneled in as speed metal albums normally do. And then you get to the vocals. For anybody who's never listened to Vulture before, the vocals sound like if Bigelow and King Diamond had a child. Some moments I was listening to Exodus, Bonded by Blood, that style vocals from that specific record. And on some moments of this album and moments of the songs, I was totally listening to King Diamond. The range is incredible. The ability to have that Exodus style aggression, that thrash metal vocalist approach, and then change from that on the dime and go completely King Diamond, but King Diamond on a speed metal track. It's really interesting. It really ignites the songs and it gives an extreme quality to the overall compositions and to the way these songs are presented. I was blown away, first and foremost by the vocals, secondly by the guitars, even though the guitars, like I said, are the other cornerstone of this album. But the vocal performance is really impactful. It's noticeable. What a great vocalist and what a great performance on this record. Now, having said all of that, the album feels that it falls short a little bit. Why does it fall short a little bit? Records like this, records that have this sound, that have this approach, that have this old school influence into them, I feel like the way they work best is if they have hooks. Musical hooks, vocal hooks. You need elements that allow the track to almost numb you to a certain degree because of the speed and the momentum and the fluidity. But then when you get to key moments within the song, mostly the chorus, the hookiness of the chorus is what makes the song stand out, is what allows you to sing along, and is what allows you to remember the track. For as good as this album is, when you get to the end of the record, I honestly couldn't really remember a specific song that jumped out at me. When I was listening to the record, I enjoyed every single one of them, and I had a lot of fun listening to the record, but there's not a single track on this album that I felt that stood out, that if I'm putting a playlist together, I must put like Draw Your Blade, for example. The album kind of loses a little bit, even though it has moments of individuality from song to song, it doesn't have that key moment that you really need. Is missing some hooks, and that's what separates an album of this style from being good to becoming great. This album is good. It's missing that to take the next step. Now, having said that, there are a couple of songs that stood out to me in the experience of listening to this album, and I want to start off with Draw Your Blades. I just mentioned that song. Now, it's a great song, but once again, there are other songs that you can compare to this one, but this track, I felt like it had a great guitar opening, and then from that guitar opening goes into an insane vocal belt. The track has great tempo. Vocally, it offers a lot of movement, and that makes the track very fluid in terms of the experience of the way the sound is moving and the way the vocals are coming together. The backing vocals in the chorus help separate the song a little bit. It helps give it also some size. It gives it a live vibe, but if you're going to have those backing vocals in the chorus, you need those vocals to work in a way of making the song feel a little. You got to find, once again, you got to find a hook. You got to find a hooky line that those vocals can say, that those vocals can sing, that makes the song immediately stand out. And just sometimes saying the title of the track is not enough. Repetition doesn't make it hooky. It just makes it repetition. So this track has great momentums to it, but it's momentums that you see throughout the album on other songs, perhaps a little bit better together on this track, because it's also a track that has great solos. The bass really helps add substance and volume to the song, and it has a great way of coming together, of offering a fun experience from start to finish. Another song that has that fun experience from start to finish is Death Row. And this one really rips from the start all the way to the end. The bass underlines the track extremely well, and it gives it some grooviness, perhaps more grooviness than thickness. The bass is really groovy, specifically when it comes through on this track, perhaps more than any other, at least more noticeable on this track. And I think the reason it is more noticeable is because the song is a little bit more compact, the song is more straightforward, the song has a little bit more of a simplistic way of being presented. It allows the guitars to drive it, it allows the vocals to engage, to be engaging and being dynamic with that vocal drive and guitar drive almost in parallel with one another. And the combination of the two makes the song feel, like I said, very compact, because they offer a similarities of approach and a similarities of results. Now, it's an interesting track because, like I said, it has that cool grooviness of the bass. That's an important element, and an element that adds uniqueness to the song. We're still missing that hook. Last but not least, Oathbreaker. Now, it starts off almost like a ballad. I thought this was going to be the second ballad on the record, which was going to be really interesting and perhaps even weird that to have two ballads on the second half of the album. Maybe that would lopsize the album a little bit, but it felt like it was going to be a ballad. At least that's how it starts. But then you realize that it's just a false start, and it goes into that more shredding style driven approach that it's pretty much the trademark of this record. Like I said, this is a far more speed metal sounding album than a thrash metal record. The vocals on this track bring something different. They still have the same approach, they still have the same range, but the tonality is slightly different, and the tonality on this track offers a little bit more darkness to the way the song comes about, and that darkness works really well with the explosive nature of the sound. It's a very King Diamond-esque style track because his voice is very explosive, is very open, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't bring darkness and despair and this somber veil to it. So this track really represents that well vocally. It has all of those same condiments, and it then offers a little bit of a thrash riff with a great bass line that is the icing on the cake. It's perhaps the thrashiest song that this album has to offer. So it's a track that goes through different stages, from that opening almost like a ballad to finishing off like a thrash metal song, and a little bit of everything in between. This is at Vulture with Sentinels, out April 12 on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts, hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next one. Take care, guys.